If your favorite game is Warzone and you wanna play it at the highest settings or in competitive settings with high FPS, this video is going to be for you. Remember that this PC build that I'm about to mention is for 1080p gaming, so if you wanna do 1440p or 4K, I recommend you watching my other PC build videos where you can find a 4K budget gaming PC build and also a 1440p PC build. But this time I'm going to talk about a 1080p gaming PC that can run Warzone at above 144 FPS in competitive settings, so if you want a high refresh rate monitor, you can get it without any issues, and if you want to play it in ultra settings, there's not an issue because you will be able to run this game at above 60 FPS on average at all times, but I do recommend you playing at competitive settings if you want to achieve the highest FPS. Now let's start with the build. So for the processor, I decided to go with the i5-12400F. Remember that we are talking about a gaming PC build, not a video editing one, so the 12400F is going to be excellent for 1080p gaming. You can make the case and go with the 12600K, but I think that is too much power for Warzone at 1080p, and it's also going to be much more expensive, not only because you have to spend more on a CPU, but you will have to spend more on the CPU cooler as well. So the 12400F, a budget-friendly CPU that's going to work great with our build. Then for the CPU cooler, you don't need a high-end CPU cooler. That's why I picked the Hyper 212 RGB Black Edition CPU cooler. This one is going to work great. You don't actually need more than this. CPU temps are going to be just fine. For the motherboard, I went with the Asus Prime B660 Plus. This one doesn't have Wi-Fi included, so if you want to connect your PC via Wi-Fi, then you will need an external card. This motherboard for 1080p gaming, once again, is all that we are going to need. Then for the memory kit, I always pick the same one, but that's because it's a budget option, and we are talking about the Silicon Power X-Power 16 gigs of RAM, 2x8, 3200 MHz of speed at CL16 memory. This is going to perform really similar to CL18 at 3600 MHz. There's actually not going to be a difference while gaming, and for $50 you are getting the RAM that you need. Then for the storage, I picked the Western Digital 1TB of M.2 SSD. If Warzone is the only game that we are going to play, then you can downgrade to 500GB of SSD. But if you want to play other games, then I think that you will need 1TB at least, because Warzone is actually a pretty heavy game. Then for the graphics card and the most important component for gaming, I went with the AMD RX 6600 XT. This one has 8 gigs of VRAM and it's a great GPU that's only $340, which I think is not that expensive considering the power that you are going to achieve for Warzone and other games as well. Like I said before, at 1080p competitive settings, you will be able to achieve above 144 FPS on average. With that being said, you can get a high refresh rate monitor. And also, if you play other competitive games that are not as heavy as Warzone, let's say Valorant, you will be able to achieve way more than 240, so you can make the case where you buy a 240Hz monitor instead of 144. But if you only play Warzone, then don't waste your money and go with a 144 1080p monitor. For the case, since you guys like it so much, I went with the Corsair 4000D Airflow, and I added some fans to make it more RGB and also make the airflow overall better. This is a really great case. I think that you can downgrade the case and still have great airflow, but if you want a really good option, the 4000D Airflow is going to make sense. Now I'm going to explain in a little bit how to make this PC cheaper without losing much performance, so make sure to stay until the end of this video. Then for the power supply, I went with the Corsair 2021 750W 80 Plus Gold power supply. This is a totally overkill for this build, but I did it considering if you want to upgrade a bunch of stuff later on. Let's say you want to change the GPU to the RTX 3070 Ti, and then you want to change the CPU to the i7-12700K, which requires much more power, then the 750W 80 Plus Gold is going to make sense. Now, if you're not thinking of doing any upgrades in the near future, you can downgrade the motherboard as well. But now I will explain how to make this PC cheaper without losing much performance and what you're losing on by downgrading these components. But before doing that, I forgot to say that the total price for this PC is going to be $1,080. I think that it's a really good price for a great experience at 1080p gaming, not only for Warzone but also for any other games that you want to play. But again, if this budget is too much for you, let me explain on how to downgrade it. So the first thing that I downgraded was the storage. Like I said before, if you're just going to play Warzone, 500 gigs of SSD is going to be enough. Now, if you want to play other games, I don't recommend you doing this downgrade. The second downgrade was the case. I ended up going with the Fantech P360A ATX mid-tower case. Now, this one is going to be great for the airflow as well, and it already comes with pre-installed fans, so you only have to install one more. And then I downgraded the power supply to a 650 watt 80 plus gold power supply, where you save around 20 bucks. And it's not going to be that terrible because this PC is going to be still upgradable, so it's not going to be as upgradable as a 750 watt 80 plus gold power supply, but this really depends on the upgrades that you want to make later on. If you're not going to do huge upgrades, then the 650 watt power supply is going to be more than enough. And the total price here will be $940, so we cut down the price by around 140 bucks, and the performance will be the same because you get the same GPU and the same CPU. Now that was the whole video. If you found it helpful, leave a like and subscribe, but most importantly hit that bell button so you get notified when I upload this type of content, which I do from 3 to 5 times a week. Thank you guys for watching, thank you for the support, and I will see you on the next one.